this meeting so we can start the meeting. So morning, everybody. Just put on my video. I think it's still on. Morning, everybody, and welcome to this 10th session of the SADC Cyber Infrastructure Experts Meeting. One of the key things I noted is that this meeting is our 10th meeting. So it's our 10-year anniversary of having this regional experts meeting since we started a couple of years back. And I think it's only befitting that as part of our discussions throughout the day today, that we also discuss plans for our 10-year celebrations that we need to host early next year. I think it's important that we have our 10-year celebrations to sort of reflect where it is we come from with this initiative. I'd like to welcome all the delegates and all the member states. I did note the different countries that have connected earlier, but I welcome all member states who are here. I think we've got Botswana, we've got Namibia, we've got South Africa, we've got Lesotho, and if I've missed any other country, just tell me if I've missed you out. I think we have got Tanzania, if I'm not mistaken, or Zambia. That's also part of us, but we're expecting more member states to join us during this session. As you know, it's a full day session that we're going to run up until this afternoon. We did send the program, the updated program, but if you've not received the program, we will share it in the chat, share the copy of the program in the chat so you can download the program. So without further ado, I would like to then also note that our apology from Mozambique, who couldn't be with us during this morning. We hope that as the day goes, Mozambique will be able to join us as part of this meeting. As you know, Mozambique is currently the chair of SADC. So those are my remarks and welcome remarks to everybody. So maybe let me also just hand over to Dr. Stole, just to say some few welcome remarks on behalf of the host as South Africa. Thank you, Dr. Stole.
Thank you very much, Annelien. I think you are very right. The road, it looks like it was only yesterday, and only now when you start counting, we can see that it has indeed been a long time since the SADC cyber infrastructure started. I think moving from where we come from, it shows that over 10 years, there has been some evolution, because we initially talked about SADC HPC, and we have evolved to get to SADC cyber infrastructure. And it will be befitting also on the 10 years to look at the progress over this period. I think that is very important, and maybe as part of the deliberations, look at how should we be able to capture this 10 years. So for that, I think all the colleagues, member states around the table, welcome, and we're really looking forward for your feedback on this 10th year celebration, and also trust that you have all been safe, you managed to join us. We know that we are meeting in a difficult period, and we are very happy to see that even during this period, then we are still able to make this contact and have this meeting. And I am hoping that in our deliberations, we will also take the lessons of the pandemic and see how we as the region can pull through and effectively use cyber infrastructure. So I'm very excited to welcome you to South Africa virtually. And we're looking forward to sort out all the problems so that we can be able to welcome you physically again. Thank you, Annelien, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Stole. So I'll just go straight ahead into our program for the day. Please allow me to project the program to you so that you can have a look. But I have also asked our host to post the program on the in the chat, in the chat, so you're able to download it. Is everybody able to see the screen with the program?
Yes, we can, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So this is the breakdown of our program. We've done our welcoming opening. As indicated, an apology from Mozambique, but it will hopefully join us as we go through our program, just to say some few words as the chair. I will give short slides, project some short slides on the key outcomes of our meeting that we held last year, 2019, which was the 9th meeting. And also our expectations for this current meeting. This is, as Dr. Stolle said, it's one of the first extraordinary meeting we're having because we're having it virtually. As you know, for the past 9 years, we've been meeting in person. It's part of our annual Christmas meeting as we prepare to go on holidays. So unfortunately, this time, because of the COVID, we have to do this virtually, but it's not going to stop us from meeting. The program, it's different from how we normally run the program. So we thought that it's important we still have our session, but even though we have it in an extraordinary way to continue the momentum of the work that we have started 9 years ago. We'll have a short report presentation from Dr. Stolle, just an update of where we are on the implementation of the SADC Cyber Infrastructure Framework. And then we have, I would put it more like even as a keynote presentation from our partners, Global Partnership for Sustainable Development and Data. Thanks to Dr. Tsiamo from Botswana for connecting us with the colleagues from GPSD. So they will give us a presentation on the importance of data in responding to COVID-19. As you know, that we are currently during the facing the battle and challenges of COVID-19. And this is a new partnership we're looking at forging with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development and Data. And we look forward to their presentation. Thereafter, we'll have a presentation from Professor Olivier, who is the UNESCO Chair for Multimodal Learning and Open Educational Resources. I see Professor is already on, as connected, and we also look forward to that presentation by Professor Olivier, who will be speaking about the era of open and distance learning, especially during the time of COVID, because that's the future that we are going into. And then we have a presentation from Professor Oosthuizen, from the Southern African Regional University Association, just to give an update on the establishment of the SADC University of Transformation. That's the initiative we are currently running at SADC. We will be establishing this virtual university, and I thought it was befitting that we have an update since that it's going to be a virtual university. It links quite nicely with the work we are doing in terms of our cyber infrastructure framework. And then we'll go to lunch break. At 1 o'clock, we will break. The session will break for an hour, just to allow you to go for some time out, and then we will reconnect at 2 o'clock for our session. But we have allowed, as per the discussions with the technicians when we were doing the dry run last week, Friday, we'll allow for a few questions. So you'll have to use the raise your hand in the icon, just to indicate whether you want to make an intervention. So we'll recognize you by raising your hand. And we do have our host in case there are certain challenges with that functionality. After lunchtime, we have presentations from our member states, which is Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, and Zambia, who's really going to share what it is they've been doing with cyber infrastructure in responding to COVID-19, basically giving us practical examples of what's currently happening on the ground in terms of using our current infrastructure that we have. And then we'll have an update from Dr. Mary Jane on the Weather and Climate Project. We have noted some key achievements they've made in this project, and it's one of the first projects that has come out of the cyber infrastructure initiative, this regional initiative that we have. And we are very proud of this project, that it's one of our first projects that we will manage to implement, and we hope many such projects will follow. And then we will recap on our governance structures that we had set up last year. You'll recall in Johannesburg in 2019 at Birchwood, We had set up some governance structures led by a group of countries. So we'll just have a recap in terms of where we are, but also how we can resuscitate that work. As we know that 2020 was a bit challenging with March, we were all unexpectedly hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. So everything basically just came to a standstill for a couple of months until we had to find ourselves in the new way or the new normal that we need to work in. So we will catch up on that. And then we'll have a presentation from Botswana, from Dr. Tiamo on establishment of Botswana's NREN. We are quite excited about this development in Botswana, and we see there's some positive steps towards establishing an NREN, and we hope that Botswana's experience will also inspire other member states to start putting in their systems in setting up their NRENs. And then we'll then do a quick recap of our day in the form of a roadmap and the key outcomes, and then we'll close our meeting at 4 o'clock, latest 10 past 4, quarter past 4. So that's the outline of our program today. I have requested our host to post it so that you can download it. If you have not received it, you can also send me an email, which I can share with you. I will then move straight to the presentation on the expectations, not to waste any time. I'll just share my screen. Can everybody see the slides?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you.
First screen.
Okay, thank you. So as you know, as I indicated, this is our 10th anniversary of the Cyber Infrastructure Experts meeting. What a milestone that we've achieved. The key objectives for our meeting, apology for the typo on objectives, is that we want to review the progress on the implementation of our framework as adopted by the ministers in 2018. Want to in 2016 in Botswana, but we also want to discuss our regional flagship projects. As indicated, we have one of them, which is on climate and weather, but we also want to identify other possible regional flagship projects that we need to implement. We also want to discuss the upscaling of our capacity building programs in cyber infrastructure, but also the link to the fourth industrial revolution strategies that we need to put in place. As I indicated, we established some governance structures as per the framework at our meeting last year, and we're just going to recap and resuscitate where the groups are on that. We want to also discuss the roll out of our equipment and connectivity. We know there's a lot of work that has been done and spearheaded through the coordination, thanks of South Africa. That's been providing a lot of support to our member states in setting up the necessary infrastructures, but also to get update where we are in rolling out. You recall the minister's decision in Namibia, where they took a decision that all member states should be connected, or all member states should have access or the infrastructure within the different institutions. So we really need to follow through on the decisions of the ministers and have a clear roadmap in terms of the rollout of these infrastructures. And then importantly, I think it would be befitting, it's only befitting that we do include discussions around COVID-19 and how our work can respond and have an impact to the challenges that we are facing with COVID-19. So it's important that we integrate that discussion within our work programs in terms of responding to COVID-19. The expectations, at the end of the day, we want updates from the working groups as per established by the governance structures. We want to also have at least some new projects that we identify that these working groups need to pursue, because now we've been organized as per the governance structures. We need to look at our capacity building and infrastructure rollout. And then I thought it's important that we also reflect and discuss our regional cyber infrastructure conference that we need to host in early 2021 in the fourth quarter in celebrating our 10 years of having this initiative. And I think it's important that, as Dr. Stolle said, we have some sort of a recount in terms of where we are, what we've achieved, what has been the challenges, and how and what more is it that we need to do as we celebrate the 10 years. So that's I'll stop there with the presentation. The other slides I will share during the time of the item on the program. So our next speaker then on the program, I think it's Dr. Stolle, who will then take us through just an update of where we are in terms of what we've achieved so far and progress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annalyn. I will now share my slides. And are we able to see on full screen? So good morning, it's still morning, good morning.
Yes, we can see.
Member states, and welcome everyone. As Annalyn has already indicated, my role is just to look at the various components of the cyber infrastructure progress. And what I will be looking at is the various components that we have identified as the priority areas for this regional meeting. So the first is obviously looking at the infrastructure rollout. In our previous meeting, we did indicate that we would like to target to have 2 countries to receive infrastructure within this financial year. So during this period, the 2 countries which were identified were Lesotho and Tanzania. And with Lesotho, we have moved in setting up the steering committee, and there are fortnightly meetings that are taking place. And through these meetings, the institution has been identified to host the HPC system in Lesotho. And this will be within the ICT department, within the government. And there has been workshops that have been held. This were for the users so that we can be able to identify users who will use the HPC system, and also training of system administrators. So people have been identified, and the discussions are going on in terms of setting up all the training programs. So in general, I would say this has been going well. And even though we have been having travel restrictions, but online has been utilized sufficiently to ensure that we can be able to make some progress. For Tanzania, the local team there has been organizing the transfer of equipment. This is from Texas Advanced Computing. So this is looking at getting part of the stampede, and we will be providing the storage for the system. And I was updated that there has been procurement of these storage systems. So as soon as they are here in South Africa, they will be transferred to the various countries. And those countries that are on the SKA partner countries, all of these countries now have got HPC systems. This will be Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia, and let me see here, Zambia. So all those countries, including Mauritius, they have got the HPC systems. Of course, the other countries like Zimbabwe had their own systems that were acquired through their own initiatives. And we have been working together with all these countries to ensure that we can build capacity in the countries, and also, where possible, also assist in developing the strategy. Also on the infrastructure side, we have got now dedicated services on the OpenStack cloud This is the cloud that was commissioned in March here in South Africa. And through this, and thanks to Intel, I think I have seen Hannes Stein in the audience here as a participant. Working together with CHPC, we put a grant to Intel, which was the global pandemic call for proposals. And we put a call. Through this call, some additional hardware was provided to South Africa. And this was in partnership, Intel and Dell provided the hardware. So this hardware here, which was obtained through a competitive bid, in the bid itself, what was highlighted was that this is not just the South African infrastructure. The infrastructure will also be used by the SADC countries and other African countries, specifically to combat COVID-19. And with that, it's the hardware, it comes also with artificial intelligence and machine learning tools that will be used by the countries. So we can report that this hardware now has been commissioned and it is ready for access. So that it is about infrastructure. But as you know, about SADC is not all just about infrastructure. It's about also capacity building. And during the lockdown and the challenges of the pandemic, we have moved most of the things online. This screen here just shows you that for commissioning of the HPC systems, we have run like the Open HPC pilot training, and this since February, this is available. Member states can be able to have access to these tools. You don't have to be waiting for a training date. You can continuously go in, and you can see there on the screen, it is different courses that are in there, and you can be able to take them through your own pace. So that is one on the Open HPC, but we have been working together with other countries, for an example, with PRAISE and SAFSARA, and building on the HPC MOOCs. And again, we just had another training now, online training in October, and we have seen that the number of member states participated in that training session. I will give you feedback on exactly how many countries participated later. You can see also on the online courses there are some videos where you can be able to see it and be able to look at the videos exactly that shows you step by step on how to configure your HPC system. So this will be able to enable us to provide training to more people, and we encourage member states to take advantage of all this online material, because with that also, our team in the background will be able to assist where you experience difficulties. This is just when we're looking at the users, and Chair, you will remember that one of the things that we looked at is that we have rolled out infrastructure, but we really want to make sure that we push on programs, research programs. And we know about the climate modeling that will be discussed more in detail, that we are very proud of. And we also have got some of the programs, as you can see in here from various member states like Namibia. We have got 4 programs in Namibia, and you can see that already they are utilizing the systems well. Botswana, there are some programs, Mauritius, Mozambique, Zambia, in this case. So we are looking forward to increasing these programs in the various member states. You will see that the programs come from different research areas like material science, We have got computational fluid dynamics. We have got genomics. So it's various areas of science that are already utilizing this system. So we can go deeper into this, but we keep in track of how member states are utilizing the HPC systems that they can access in South Africa. The other initiative that we're looking at, and Chair alluded to this, one of the things that we looked at during the pandemic when we were under lockdown, I think most of the SADC countries since March were under lockdown. And during this period, there were a number of initiatives that took place. And these initiatives were looking at how can we be using cyber infrastructure to combat either the impact of COVID-19 or combat COVID-19 directly. So some of the things in combating COVID-19 are issues of contact tracing, because contact tracing and tracking has been one of the ways of making sure that the spread of the disease is minimized. So this is one of the things that we have been following. And under the contact tracing, it is development of portals for contact tracing and tracking, and also using mobile operators information for this purpose. So this has been one of the things that we have been looking at, and we think that it is some collaborative project that we can work together in SADC. You will remember that for one to be able to utilize this efficiently, if people travel from one country to another, we need to be able to share that information and relate it also on how the spread of the disease takes place, and how can we be able to utilize that to minimize the spreading of disease within the region. The other area that we're looking at is our schools and universities have been severely impacted during COVID-19. And with this, kids moved and they were at their homes. And one of the challenges that we realized, as much as we thought there are tools that people can be able to do online learning, some challenges in our countries started appearing where we did not have equitable distribution of resources. And the resources here being mainly connectivity that allows the kids to have access to learning material. And for this, through these lessons, we think that there could be some plans where we can be able to share knowledge amongst member countries on how we should be able to develop portals that will provide access to learning materials. But also what we found is that to be able to make everybody to have the opportunity to be able to learn while they're at home, connectivity is quite important. And we think that in this area, the entrance within cyber infrastructure will be very critical in playing this role. And we're looking at how do we use the entrance, for an example, your Zamran, Moranet, Sandran in South Africa. How can we be able to develop tools so that we can be able to extend, say, for an example, platforms like Edgerome, and we can get our users, while students are not at universities, they can still be able to have connectivity. This is one of the things that I hope we will discuss it in more details in this meeting. The other part, of course, has been on predictive analysis, where we're looking at modeling and simulations. And in this area, it's more about sharing of the data. A lot of people who work in genomics who have been looking at, for an example, the COVID-19 development of the vaccines. The challenge is also access to data. And besides the modeling tools from chemistry or material science that our users are using, access to data is a big challenge. So We think that looking at these tools and sharing the data, and this is where we think that the AI and machine learning tools that have been provided through the Intel grant will also play an important role here, because this is also looking at the global response for COVID-19 from Intel. So it is not just the SADC countries, but we're looking at globally, sharing that information globally. Lastly, Chair, is on the decision support platforms for our government. I think over this period, we realized that our government started identifying that cyber infrastructure plays an important role. In South Africa, for an example, the OpenStack Cloud, which was just commissioned 2 days before the lockdown, the national lockdown, we found that that system was immediately used for all these purposes, for contact tracing, for the National Command Center, but also at the same time, for this all predictive analysis from our users. So cyber infrastructure became very important. And what we think that it is very important that also during this period, as it played an important role for our government, how do we make sure that we entrench this thing so that it is not just a once-off event, but we ensure that our government continuously have got platforms that will assist them to have information that we can share across our member states for decision-making process. I think with this, Chair, during the day, we will be dwelling deeper into all these aspects, but this just gives you the synopsis of what we have been doing. And during the course of the workshop, we will go deeper into all these details. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stolle. Thanks for the very enriching update of where we are in terms of implementation of our cyber infrastructure framework. And I hope that member states and the participants have taken some notes so that when we get to our discussion session, you are able to pick up and raise some of these issues that have been highlighted in our progress report as presented by Dr. Stolle. We welcome the new participants who have joined us. I've seen Mozambique has also joined now. Welcome, Mozambique, and other participants that have joined us. I also sent a note on the chat requesting if you can please, if possible, next to your name, put your country, so that when we get to the discussion session and you raise your hand, we are able to identify you by your country where you come from. So I hope Corne is also listening to me, the host, so that they are able to include their countries next to their names. It will make it very easy for us during the discussion and question session. So thanks to Dr. Stolle. We will share the presentations after our meeting. We'll put all the presentations together and share after the meeting. So without any further ado, so that we make sure we keep on time, and I'm happy that we are not doing too bad with time. We are on time with our program, and in fact, we are even early. I'd like to invite Mr. Davis Adinho, who is from the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. I'll just give you a short background on Mr. Adinho. I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly. But Mr. Adinho is the Director for Programs for the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, based in Nairobi, Kenya. He works across sectors through national data roadmap processes to define strategies that support their priorities for investment and innovations in data. Mr. Davis, I hope it's Mr. or Doctor because it was not said in the bio, previously worked as the Global Partnerships Regional Director for Africa. And prior to this, he also worked for Civicus World Alliance as Senior Advisor of Data Accountability and Sustainable Development for development initiatives. as a Senior Manager of Strategic Partnerships and Data Use. So you can see that his background is really in data, and we really look forward to his presentation. So Mr. Adinho, if you're ready, you can share your screen. I'm sure they've enabled that functionality. Welcome, and please welcome to this community. I'm not sure if you had joined us earlier when I did the welcome, that this community was started 10 years ago. So this is our 10th anniversary as the SADC Cyber Infrastructure Experts Group. We do have the SADC Cyber Infrastructure Framework, which was approved by the ministers in 2016. And since then, we've been implementing the directives from the ministers, the SADC Ministers for Science and Technology. So we welcome you, and thanks again to Dr. Tsiamo for introducing us, and that you were able to accept our invitation to be part of our meeting. We are really honored to have you to come and present at our meeting. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair Annelien. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes,
I'll become
we can hear you clearly. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'll become a doctor soon when I grow up. But meanwhile, I'm Mr. Davis Adieno, as you rightly put it. Pronunciation varies depending on where you come from. It's such a privilege for the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data to be addressing participants in this virtual meeting, and congratulations on your 10th anniversary. It means that you've stood the test of time, and that you continue to serve the purpose that you have formed to perform. So we really appreciate and are honored to really present this gathering about some of the work we've been doing around data. I'll start sharing my screen shortly, and just to mention that the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data is a global network that brings together multilateral agencies. It brings together many civil society organizations. We have private sector partners. We have many other organizations that are primarily brought together really to look at how data statistics can really be a key driver for sustainable development. And the idea really for us is to think about ways in which we can work with multiple partners across the globe, to catalyze collaboration, to work together to foster innovation, and of course, inspire change makers to prioritize data, because it's absolutely important when it comes to sustainable development. Now, I'm going to talk about a partnership that we launched earlier this year in April, together with the United Nations Commission for Africa, COVID-19 Data for a Resilient Africa. This was as a result of a call by member states across the region to the UNECA that they needed support, because at the time the pandemic was just setting into the continent. Many countries were trying to figure out modalities of how they can ensure that their surveillance systems, health information systems are well prepared, and that they have access to tools, platforms, and many other solutions, and of course understand priority data needs in ways that then help us to connect the countries with the supply side partners that can provide the support that's needed either in country or at the regional level. And of course, beyond this, thinking much more broadly about how we can provide skills and capacity that then strengthen the systems in the long term. In other words, beyond COVID, then what is it that you can actually do to continue supporting member states with the platforms, the tools, the methodologies, and the skills that have been deployed to fight this particular pandemic. And we primarily had lots of conversations with our existing country partners and new partners to really understand, what the healthcare burden was, determine whether interventions like social distancing, travel restrictions, are effective, identify and mitigate socioeconomic impact. So look at, what is the anticipated impact of COVID-19 on small and medium-sized enterprises, on employment, on tourism, and many other areas. And we narrowed the focus to 4 main areas. Number 1 is population, basically looking at how we can determine where people are and who is the most at risk, to support governments to plan and allocate resources effectively. And then once you understand where the population is, what is the nature of the health infrastructure within a particular country, how accessible are, for example, hospitals, dispensaries, clinics, etc. Are they well prepared? Do they have PPE, personal protective equipment, for example? Do they have adequate masks? Are the staff well trained on this particular virus and how to tackle it? And then the third area was focusing on virus tracking and forecasting. Basically, once the virus gets into a community, what is it that you need to do as a country to make sure that the containment measures, how are people moving from one area to another? What are the high risk areas? For example, markets and other public areas. And all that requires a lot of data. And then lastly, economic impact. Basically looking at the trajectory of the virus as it gets into the communities and how that is impacting, like I said, small and medium-sized enterprises, job losses, tourism, and statistics, and help governments with the data that they actually need to try and plan effectively, to minimize or mitigate both risks, but also impact on livelihoods and cushion their own economies when it comes to this particular pandemic. So we at the very onset, working very closely with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and many amazing partners who joined us. Grade 3, we had Frame, we had Flowminder, and Dalberg Data Insights, Qatar Computing Research Institute, and many others. So non-profits, but also profit-making, Esri, as one of the private sector companies. So we came together with a long list of about 35 and even counting supply-side partners who basically said, if you're launching this particular initiative, we want to work with you. We are happy to provide pro bono services. We are happy to provide technical services, data platforms, solutions, really, that can support different countries to effectively mitigate the impacts of the COVID-19. And so we reached out to human resident coordinators through ECA. We reached out to heads of national statistical offices, basically institutions in country that have a mandate on data and statistics, but also have access to national COVID-19 response teams. And we had conversations across these different countries, identifying what the priorities were, both short and in the longer term. And by doing that, we were able then to go back to the partners that I was talking about earlier and basically say, a particular country needs a COVID-19 data hub. Are you able to provide it? And within a very short time, all these different partners would come together, and within days, they'll definitely, put together the data COVID hubs. And now, maybe just to share what we've done, we've had consultations. We reached out to 54 countries across the region. We've had consultations with 50, and we currently have active engagements in about 35 countries across the region. We've had active engagements and discussions with UNRCs or resident coordinators in 18 countries and national statistical offices in about 22 countries. And we have currently brokered partnerships in about 34 countries with various levels of outputs. So for some of them, introductions have been made, and it's an ongoing process. And it seems like, the pandemic is unrelenting. So the more we thought that towards the end of this year would see a decline in the virus, we are seeing a spike across the world. And what is sad about this is that a spike in any spot in the world is a major risk to the rest of the world, given just how fast this particular virus can spread. So, we have Botswana, Cape Verde. We have partnerships strengthened in about 9 countries, Burkina Faso, and DR Congo. So these are countries where there were already initiatives, but then through the brokerage with the ECA and ourselves, we basically brought in more players and brought in more actors who could then bolster ongoing efforts. We have 24 partnerships brokered, and where collaboration has been undertaken and capacity is being transferred from the providers of the solutions to those in countries. And we have progress to deliver specific outputs in those particular countries. Now, when you look at some of the outputs and outcomes, we have data hubs that have been developed across the region. We have data sharing amongst institutions that ordinarily wouldn't speak to each other. We have analysis and capacity support, basically either private sector partners providing this analysis, working very closely with government agencies or academia. And this analysis, therefore, informing decision-making within this particular countries. So we have Guinea, Rwanda, Namibia, Sierra Leone, Somalia, Senegal, and Togo as just some examples. But beyond providing the data, the tools, the solutions, we are looking at data-driven decision-making and the inclusion of key agencies that provide data on a more sustainable basis. For example, the National Statistical Offices have a mandate to provide data and statistics to governments across the region. So working with us in a way that then allows the transfer of the knowledge and the skills to reside with those institutions. And we've done this in Ghana, Guinea, Mauritius, Namibia, and Nigeria. So when you look at the long list of the countries that we have needs identified in 19 countries, technical discussions in about 12 countries, partnerships brokered in 6 countries and counting, and we have some outputs materialized in about 12 countries. We are currently in the process of documenting some of the impact stories. We have 2 that have been published on our website, and there are 10 more impact stories out of this partnership that are being currently developed. But beyond all this, we have to think about how we mitigate risk. We have to think about how we address sustainability, and we have to think about how we can identify alternative approaches that foster innovation while thinking, post-COVID, and then identify which partnerships need to be brokered and what the next steps can be. So, do we have gaps, for example, on the supply side when it comes to specific data sets, when it comes to, for example, the use of innovative and new complementary sources of data? And we are currently, I'll give you an example, we've developed a capacity building strategy that we are currently working with Statistics Canada, Statistics Finland, and the UN Global Platform to provide support when it comes to the use of scanner data to compute the consumer price index, and of course, look at many other aspects of economic monitoring and recovery when it comes to COVID-19. So we also, during these conversations, identify opportunities where either the global partnership is best poised. So we have what we call an inclusive data charter, which is supported across the world by many partners. And it provides technical support and political support when it comes to data disaggregation, including of populations that are invisible traditionally in the data. So the homeless, migrating communities, etc. And all these, while doing that, we also look at administrative data systems. We look at Earth observations and satellite imagery, mobile data, and many other new sources that can provide timely insights, for example, on mobility, settlements, etc. And so for us, really, as part of these engagements, we identify what the short-term and medium-term plans are within a particular country, with a view of understanding how that might impact different parts of the different countries, and of course, and of course, many other aspects. We do recognize that this work also comes with specific risks. So before we forge any partnerships, we assess risk at 3 different levels. Number 1, who is providing the service, the tools, and of course the solution. And then we also look at the country in which that solution is going to be provided. And then at the third level is, once the two come together, there are certain risks that emerge. So data privacy concerns, have to be factored in. Data sharing agreements. So when governments are sharing some of the data, what do they need to have in place to make sure that privacy is protected and the data is actually used for social good? So in Ghana, we worked with the ESRI and Frame, where we brokered a partnership. ESRI provided access to its online platforms, the tools, the data, free ArcGIS licenses, and technical support to Ghana to develop a COVID-19 monitoring dashboard and information hub that integrates a lot of different other hubs within a central place. And Frame came in to provide geospatial data and technical support. And now the Ghana Statistical Service is embedding more data from their household and job trackers, basically measuring national socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 into the dashboard. So beyond COVID-19, these dashboards and data hubs are now serving a much broader purpose, and we hope that they will continue to do so with the support. And coming down for the south, we invited Namibia Statistics Agency to a peer exchange to learn from Kenya and Ghana's experience in developing data dashboard and COVID-19 data hub. And on Namibia Statistics Agency request, we brokered a partnership between the Grid 3 Consortium that brings together UNFPA, Columbia University, ESRI, Frame, Dalberg, and many other partners to build a COVID-19 data hub for Namibia. Now, the new data hub actually holds various hubs, like I said, within the infrastructure, looking at vulnerability, mobility patterns, socioeconomic statistics, gender, etc. And as a result of this particular work and the brokerage, the focal point of the Namibia Statistics Agency has now been included in the COVID-19 task force, where weekly meetings are held, and she actually provides updates. So we see the important role of data and information when it comes to supporting national level efforts. So these decisions have to be made. We are conscious that, even when these decisions are being made, resources have to follow, and there's significant gaps when it comes to capacity. So we've developed a capacity building strategy that looks at, many aspects, including data science, capability for national statistical offices, Earth observations, handling economic data, and of course, soft skills that support the managerial aspects of doing this kind of work. We also have some examples from Togo and Senegal, but because of time, I will not run through those. We've done similar work in Sierra Leone with the Grade 3 team, Frame, CISAN, and ESRI. So what we really hope to do is to continue working with many other countries across the region to consolidate this work, but also look at the post-COVID-19 needs with assessments, and of course the application of recovery and resilience funding within these countries, and then continue to offer capacity building, and of course foster peer-to-peer exchanges where we can work together with UN resident coordinators, national statistical offices, ministries of planning, and many others to make sure that both funding but also technical expertise is brought together with the political to make sure that countries effectively not only combat COVID but also think about the economic recovery aspects of all this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Dino, for such a great presentation. Very, very informative. We're really happy that we were able to link up through you, with you to be part of this meeting. I've made a couple of notes, and definitely I hope we'll be the 25th partner to be brokered. You mentioned that you've brokered 24 partnerships, and we hope that the SADC region will be the 25th partner that you're going to broker through this meeting. We see a start of a great relationship that we need to forge and develop. Very interesting. Your strategic priorities are very much linked with our strategic priorities, as you could see from the presentation made by Dr. Stole, in terms of our cyber infrastructure initiative because we're focusing on capacity building, which is looking at issues of data, information. We have the infrastructure that we are rolling out to the different institutions. So I think the partnership that we forge with you will be actually much easier, because we've already set up the different infrastructures in the different countries. You're already working with Namibia. I see Madagascar, Seychelles, Botswana as a new country you are bringing on board, Zambia, and these are all already, I think you're working with more than 6 SADC countries already, and this will make it quite easy to bring on board the other countries, and we can pilot some of the initiatives that you have mentioned. I was very much interested about the impact stories that you are tracking, and it's through those impact stories that we'll be able to learn and replicate and see what can we replicate within the region. I think your key focus areas is exactly what we focus on also, issues of Earth observation, satellite, and these are some of the areas that we focus on in our different areas of work. So I think very enriching presentation, I must say, and I'm sure the rest of the participants were very much enriched by your presentation. I'm sure my colleague, I'm going to put her on the spot, Ms. Mampe Chaba from South Africa. I'm sure she was listening, and I'm sure she's already thinking about some partnerships to be put together, and we really look forward to putting this partnership together with you through the SADC initiative. We will have a session, according to the program, we will have a session so shortly. We will open up for the participants to ask some questions and comments. So we hope that you are staying with us for some time so that you can address some of the comments and questions that will come through that session. But without further ado, thanks a lot, Mr. Dino, and thanks a lot for your presentation. And we also ask that you please share your presentation by email so that we can share it with the rest of the participants. I'd also like to note that we have a very strong partnership with UNECA, the Economic Commission for Africa at regional level. In fact, we've got a memorandum of understanding with them. So we work very well with UNECA. They've supported a number of regional initiatives. So we don't see this really as a problem. We see us quickly jumping onto the bandwagon and taking up these opportunities that you've offered. We know that UNECA is also working with a number of member states in SADC, notably countries such as South Africa, and others are also having some bilateral relations with UNECA. But at the regional level, we have a much bigger framework of cooperation with UNECA, and we see this as an exciting opportunity to join this initiative on data through the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. Thank you. Thanks once more again, and I will clap on behalf of the rest of the participants. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot again for accepting the to present. So colleagues, as you can see, very exciting, very interesting presentation we've just received from Mr. Dino. And I'm sure the next presentation will be as much exciting. And I'm happy that the presentations that are coming are all linked to each other. And the common denominator of all of these presentations is data. It's really about data. It's data driven. And I'm really happy that we have these presentations lined up as part of our program that we have for today. I'd like to now introduce Professor Olivier, who's going to take the floor and share a presentation with us as per the next item on the program. He'll be presenting on opportunities on open and distance learning. And again, what are the implications in terms of COVID-19 and the future of digitization? So Professor Olivier is the UNESCO Chair for Multimodal Learning and Open Educational Resources. He is based at the South African Northwest University. And he is the UNESCO chair. He holds the chair for UNESCO on modal learning and open educational resources. He obtained his PhD in 2011, in which he researched the accommodation and promotion of multilingualism in schools through blended learning. He joined the Northwest University as a lecturer in 2010 and was promoted to professor in 2018. In 2018, he received the Emerging Researcher Medal from the Education Association of South Africa and is a rated researcher with the National Research Foundation. His research, located within the Northwest University Research Unit for Self-Directed Learning, is focused on self-directed learning, multimodal learning, open educational resources, multiliteracies, individualized, contextualized and blended learning and e-learning in language classrooms and online multilingualism. So that's the brief bio introducing Professor Olivier. Professor Olivier, you are welcome to take the floor and share your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I just want to confirm whether you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can. And
Just
I'm sure
another,
everybody can.
just a question. I just wanted to know whether the co-presenter is also presenting, Ms. Caroline Medal Anonuevo, or is it just me?
No,
Just in
it's
terms
just
of
you.
my time, I just need to adjust.
No, it's just you. It's just you. So you get the full time.
Okay, I'll work in accordingly.
Yeah, it's just you, Prof, and so you get the full time allocated.
Right. Good afternoon, colleagues. I will share my screen in a moment. Right, is that visible?
Yes, Prof, it's visible. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you once again for this opportunity, colleagues. It's a privilege to talk to you about what is going on within education, within the COVID context, and what is going on with open distance learning, a very dynamic and increasingly important facet of higher education, especially, but always also creeping into other levels of education. So from my side, as I say, it's a privilege to talk to you. I am going to talk to you about two facets of my work. First of all, reflecting a bit on mapping research that we are busy with and which is still ongoing that pertains to the situation currently. And then also I will touch on some of the work we are doing within the UNESCO chair and within our NOMSA network, which might be of interest to you. So from my side, this is the focus lies within the UNESCO chair on multimodal learning and open education resources, as was noted at the beginning. And this is a research chair situated at the Northwest University. Now, I am within a faculty of education, so I approach data, we've spoken a lot about data this morning, approach data with a pedagogical lens on. So for me, it's not just about the data and not just about making things efficient and knowing who are we working with, but also going back to not just big data, but big feelings. Within an educational context, it's for us very important to look at the effectual issues. And within the COVID context, that has been something that's very prominent, is getting students to be motivated to learn. And that, by implication, also involves having sufficient access, having sufficient support. And that is quite often lacking. But I will come back to that in a moment. So I'm looking with an educational lens, a pedagogical lens, and as I also, you can see it on the screen there, I work within a research unit for self-directed learning, and that is something that we want to promote, but I will mention something about that in a bit later. So there's been an increase in multimodal approaches to delivery, and what we mean with that is more distance education and hybrid forms of that. That is obvious from the lockdown situations, COVID-19 start of the pandemic. A lot of institutions had to move very quickly online using existing learning management systems, which were intended to be used in conjunction with face-to-face situations. So there's been this increase. So multimodality is very important. I need to note at this point, perhaps, how we see multimodal learning, as is used in our chair's name, is quite wider. It does not just pertain to distance education. There's actually 4 levels of multimodality that play in. At the lowest level, it relates to the individual multimodality. So addressing the needs of the individual students. Some students might have certain skills, others don't. Some students might have certain preferences in terms of how they consume information and in comparison to others. Then the second level will be the interactional multimodality, and that relates to how we communicate with it, that it's not just verbal, it's not just through words, but it is increasingly in education. We need to ensure that our students are visually literate, etc. The third level, of course, is instructional multimodality, and that pertains to how we learn. And this is where e-learning comes in, and online learning comes in, and the hybrid forms of that. For example, blended learning, when you mix face-to-face with online learning, that's instructional multimodality. And then the highest level, and that pertains a lot to the multimodal approach in general, and that is whether you have a delivery that's distance or contact, or a hybrid form of that. So that's more, as I say, institutional multimodality, it's more administrative matter. So current education, especially in higher education, is influenced by all four of these levels, and they play into all classrooms. So in your focus in terms of the cyber infrastructure, that is essential at all points. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are busy with a big mapping research project where we research the whole SADC country. Something that I forgot to say is that the UNESCO chair, even though it's hosted by a South African institution, has got a focus on SADC. In our agreement with UNESCO, we've actually worded it as such that we focus on a wider region, not just South Africa. So our preliminary findings from that mapping research, and the mapping research was basically just to get a sense of what is going on with multimodal learning, and also then open educational resources in the region. And what we found at this point is basically that the research is limited to a certain number of countries. There are countries where there's not up-to-date research being done, and we've got limited ideas of what is going on. There are some good practices, but still a lot of challenges. And the needs vary a lot in terms of expertise and the technologies being used. My sense is that COVID-19 has highlighted pre-existing issues around access and skills. And those two go together. I think that the access is often in people's minds, but not so much the skills. And that is not only on the side of students, but also on the side of lecturers. It is not really responsible to require lecturers who've been trained for face-to-face interactions to just translate into a distance mode, or even just an online mode of teaching and learning. Something that was quite alarming, a lot of Southern African institutions advocated a low-tech and no-tech approach in their handling of learning throughout the COVID time. And why I say this is alarming is that we reduce the affordances that we get from any online environment. And quite often this is due to access, this is due to students not having devices, but ultimately the student experience is diminished. All the advantages you might have by using technologies are lost. The collaboration opportunities are lost. Humans are social beings. We learn through others, not just alone. And this context has actually exacerbated this situation where low-tech, no-tech means you don't have contact with peers in a classroom situation. There's been an overemphasis on technology and access, and yes, that is the first step, but not learning and the diverse student needs. And that is something that we as educators, but also you in the different fields that you are working in, need to consider that our students have different learning needs, and also needs that in terms of how to be able to study, how to be able to do their learning, which not pertain necessarily to technologies, but rather other more effectual and personal circumstances. So I want to present a couple of priorities that has come from the mapping research, but also a couple of recent research projects that we have completed. We have, for example, have looked at some of the advice given by institutions during this time. And the research there has shown that generally the advice adheres to pedagogical principles, but there are some issues. There are some concerns when it comes to reducing the effectiveness of the learning situation. So priorities for me, first of all, would be capacity building around digital literacies and meta literacy. Digital literacy, that pertains to how to use your device. That is fairly straightforward, but it's also a difficult thing to handle if you don't have contact with students. You need to personalize that experience because the needs would be different. Then I highlight meta literacy. This is also very relevant, not just for students, but our lecturers as well. Meta literacy is something that comes from the whole information literacy world, and that pertains to how do I select resources that I use for research or use resources I use for educational purposes, which are reliable and within an era of fake news and where people start to question facts, meta literacy is extremely important because we need to train our students and train and empower our lecturers and even teachers at school level to be meta literate so that they can determine what is reliable information and how to ethically and responsibly share that. We are at a point where when it comes to online content, and this relates to open educational resources, which I will also mention again, we need to not just rely on content from the global north, from the west, from elsewhere that is ready-made. In the current educational milieu and context, we are at the point where lecturers need to create content for their contexts. Content that is related to students, that is situated in the students' world. From my own research conducted for the past 2 years, last year I worked on teaching and learning, this year specifically on an assessment. I have found that at many South African universities, that is the trend. The content is generic. It's approached generically. It's not necessarily made custom for the students in a specific class. There's an approach that science is neutral, and that is not the truth. Then a further aspect there is self-directed learning. Any situation where students are put in an isolated, autonomous learning context like we've had with COVID, they are basically forced to become self-directed in a sense. But the problem comes in we don't give them sufficient tools. Now, self-directed learning is a characteristic and it's also a process, so we see it as both, that relates to how students take charge of their own learning, to set goals, to choose the resources, and that resources can be physical things, but can also be people, either a teacher, a lecturer, or peers, and then also are able to evaluate their own learning by themselves. So how can we foster the self-directed learning? And that is, we require learning that's active. And if you go back to what I mentioned earlier about low tech, no tech, then active learning is gone. The learning needs to be cooperative. Students need to interact with peers for them to effectively learn. And finally, another way of doing it is to follow a problem-based learning approach. So these are some of the strategies that can be used to foster self-directedness, but there are many more. And we are doing active research in this regard at school and university level at the Northwest University. We need to be preparing students for a changing world. It was mentioned earlier about the fourth industrial revolution, and definitely lifelong learners within that context will have to be self-directed lifelong learners. Students will need to be able to realize, yes, it's not about getting the degree, and when the degree is done, they have arrived and it's finished. Learning should be an ongoing process, and if we make them self-directed learners, they will be able to identify new goals as they go along. So that is one of the most essential 21st century skills that we need to look at whenever we envision what kind of infrastructure needs to be there, because the infrastructure needs to support these issues. When it comes to blended learning at our university, we've already proven time and time again that if you approach blended learning sufficiently with cooperative learning and problem-based strategies, the blended learning environments can actually be conducive to creating self-directed learning. But it needs to be planned. It doesn't necessarily just happen by itself. So cyber infrastructure should be informed by pedagogical principles and research, and that is very important. Data was mentioned, and I totally agree. We are in an age where data analytics is the way forward. We're also looking at that in terms of adaptive learning within the research unit where I'm at, where the experience of students can be made, tailor-made according to their needs. And that is where adaptive learning comes in. It differentiates, it makes the learning environment unique to every student. And that starts with the infrastructure, it starts with the learning management systems that universities use. And for that, we need the data. And I always get the sense that it's approached in isolation and not in conjunction, for example, with wider educational research and administrative systems. So there needs to be a very structured and a multi-pronged approach when it comes to this kind of data gathering. Open educational resources, very important. Southern Africa cannot afford to go the commercial route anymore when it comes to resources. Textbooks are really highly priced. A trend that has been in higher education for years is where there's a double dipping, where academics write textbooks, the textbooks are sold to students, and in some cases they might even get subsidy from government for the publication and then also get some money for the textbook being sold. We need to, as a region, take a stand and say educational resources need to be openly licensed. Our students need to be able to get content that is created by academics, experts in the field, maybe even built on existing open educational resources. Use that, print it out, and without contravening any copyright laws. So open educational resource, as I say, it's a very wide concept. It covers a lot of things from full courses down to textbooks, to videos, to even software applications. Any tool that you can use for the educational teaching and learning or assessment purposes that is openly licensed. In other words, students and other lecturers can use and reuse and change these resources depending on the relevant license. And the Creative Commons licensing works very well, and that is totally in agreement with, as far as I know, most of the SADC countries' copyright legislation. So open educational resources is a very high priority in my mind, not just for the price aspect, but also the localization aspect. And this is something I need to briefly just mention. Open educational resources allow lecturers to customize content for their classes, for their context, and not just have generic content. And that can be done with sufficient support, of course, very cheaply. It's not a whole process of going through a publisher, but institutions need to be wary of quality concerns and have proper OER policies, and I gladly engage in this regard as well. Then access. Access is very important, and as I say, a lot of the discussions stop to formal access, and I've taken formal and epistemological access from the works of Wally Morrow, where he refers to formal access being able to get to the university, you're in the university, whilst epistemological more relate to understanding what is being taught in the university context. I want to draw this further into the online environment. So formal access for me online would be giving students devices, giving them access to the internet. Epistemological is giving them that support to make use of learning management systems and content on those devices to learn. But then the third one, and that is the area for further development, is demiurgic access. And for me, that is related to students being able to create resources themselves in order to, in order to contribute to the knowledge field. We need to rethink assessment. Assessment is more than just gate at the end. It should be learning in itself. A lot of institutions are experiencing a lot of problems with examinations because the examination is the big thing. That's the key. Whilst we should rather focus on what are the students learning throughout the year than looking at the gate at the end of the road. I want to highlight we as a region need to focus on quality education and reducing inequalities within that educational environment. I'm finishing off by just highlighting, I hope that from the UNESCO Chair on Multimodal Learning, our side, we will be able to contribute in this regard to building networks, building capacity. We are busy with 2 training programs which will be available for lecturers and teachers, one on open education and open educational resources, and another on self-directed multimodal learning. And then also through our research, be of service to the region. Finally, I want to mention NOMSA, the Network of Open Educational Resources, Multimodal Self-Directed Learning in Southern Africa. And please look on the website, and there's a place where you can add your contact details if you want to follow our progress. This network established this year, we've already got a footprint in Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, Eswatini, Mauritius, Tanzania, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. For specifically our advisory board with members working on, and all of them are academics within this region, promoting these issues. And we've got a book coming out somewhere next year on specifically open educational resources and self-directed learning in Africa. So we've extended the focus there, but most of the authors come from this region. So hopefully this is one avenue of supporting the work being done here. But we are open for collaboration or to support any online educational initiatives in terms of research, but also capacity building. From my side, that is it. Thank you very much, colleagues. You are welcome to contact me by email if I can be of help, or if you want to get more information about our mapping research and the future work. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Professor Olafir. Thanks again once more for a very exciting and enriching presentation. I think it builds on nicely on the presentation we had from Mr. Adinho on issues of data. And we see that our collaboration opportunities are growing. And now that we have UNESCO, the UNESCO chair on board, and also as a new participant to this SADC platform or initiative, we hope that we will build a long-term relationship with the chair. And I'm happy that you noted that the chair as focus is one of the focus of the chair is on SADC, and definitely we will engage with you, especially we do have the education sector at SADC. You noted that the next presentation is supposed to be on the establishment of the SADC University of Transformation. And one of the things that we discussed at the last meeting, because we're still in the inception or conceptualization phase of this virtual university, is issues of e-learning, the programs that will be delivered, the curriculum that will be delivered, the issues of accreditation. So I think it will be very important that we bring your chair on board to be part of that discussion as we look at the conceptualization of this virtual university. And I think you raised quite important issues in terms of e-learning, and we can see that e-learning is the future. It has been there, but I think not really emphasized in the past. But I think now since the COVID, it has highlighted, it has put e-learning in the spotlight, and it's the future that we'll have to deliver most of our educational platforms on. So we thank you once more for that presentation. And again, we will have a session now for discussions. Our presenter for the SADC University Virtual University is not yet available. So we'll defer that presentation later on after lunch, once we try to locate the presenter. If we don't locate the presenter, we will try to share towards the end, so that it's important that you are aware of what it is that we are busy establishing in terms of this virtual university, which was the directive from the SADC heads of state that we established this university. So we'll try and get them on board so that they can share the presentation. I'm happy that it gives us enough time now to ask questions. Now that we have this one presentation that's deferred for after lunch. So it gives us more time to ask questions and open up the floor. As previously indicated, we've asked our host to enable for you to raise your hand. So through the show of hands, please show your hands in the panel so that we can identify you and allow you to ask your question. I'd also once more again ask you to add your country after your name. Just add which country you come from after your name. It will also help us to locate and get more information on which other member states are participating. So with those few words and comments, we thank Professor Olivier once more again for a very insightful and interesting and very relevant presentation that has been delivered. So we've had so far quite enriching presentations. The first presentation was from Dr. Stole, who gave us a progress update of where we are, and we can see that we are progressing quite well. Very exciting to see that Lesotho and Tanzania now are busy with their infrastructure, to set up their infrastructure, to set up their systems. Very exciting news that we got. And we can see the increase of the projects that countries are now engaged in, the different projects that are engaging through the use of their systems. We had a very good presentation from Mr. Adino in terms of the work they are doing with UNECA in terms of data. And very exciting to see that already there are SADC countries who are participating in this partnership, and we look forward to being part of that partnership. And then we had a presentation from Professor Olofir on the e-learning platforms, but also the work they are doing as the UNESCO chair for multimodal learning. So I now open up the floor for you to take for comments or questions. I think the speakers can still respond, but we'll first take a first round of questions, and then we'll allow the relevant speakers to respond to the questions. Thank you. Please just show your hands. Kone, can you please confirm if they are able to raise their hands? Okay, Kone has confirmed in the chat that yes, you are able to raise your hands. So please do raise your hands so that we can recognize you for the Q&A. You are also welcome to post your questions in the chat. We'll also pick up your questions in the chat. Thank you. I've recognized, I think it's Dr. Mtsefwa from Botswana. I've recognized you. Please take the floor.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Annelien, and thanks for the wonderful presentations that were made right from the beginning. Obviously highlighting arguably the two very big areas affected by COVID and affected by COVID, namely the issue of health and the issue of making sure that we continue providing the service of learning to our learners. I think those are critical issues. I just have one question for the last speaker, the UNESCO chair, regarding learning. I think a lot of countries, you mentioned this yourself, Annelien, regarding 4IR and the digital skills. I wonder, maybe taking him out of his presentation, can he maybe say a little bit about what, in his experience or assessments that he's done, how institutions are dealing or progressing regarding, institutional policies? Because at a different level, you got national policies, then you got institutional policies themselves to really facilitate e-learning. I think this is critical because you need obviously a national approach, but also institutional strategic approach in these matters. And of course, with these policies or strategies, there are resource implications and moving of resources around. So that's one question regarding institutional and national policies to really not in a token manner, but in a concerted manner, address the issue of continuous learning over these platforms. And again, tied into that question is the issue of really doing the groundwork in assessment of digital skills vis-a-vis our national qualification frameworks. So I really wanted maybe just to tease out his mind regarding his experience in these areas, both on policy regarding facilitating learning, but also in what countries are doing regarding detailed assessments of the necessary digital skills, really across the board, not just at institutions like universities, but really throughout the pipeline of the learning pipeline. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Mthegwa. Professor Olivier, please, you're welcome to respond.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and colleague. Yes, these are two very big issues you touch on. And in my mind, we haven't got sufficient data on either of these. From the mapping we have done, let me just get my camera on there. From the mapping we have done, there are institutional policies in some of the institutions that relate to online learning, blended learning, quite often embedded within the normal learning, teaching and learning policies. So teaching and learning policies, that's fairly standard and that's fairly common within the region. But in my mind, the ones that we've so far touched on with the mapping exercise are not sufficient when it comes to openness. It's not sufficient when it comes to adhering to a lot of the latest trends in education. Adaptive learning is something that is not, and that relates specifically to data analytics. That is not infused in a lot of these policies. So I think that is something that could potentially be driven at a national level, where institutions can be guided towards including a lot of these issues in their policies. So yes, they are there, but I don't think they're necessarily sufficient always. When it comes to digital skills, that is highly problematic. I've been working in the wider field of literacies for quite a while, and it's really a problem, as there's no single set of digital skills that prepares you for the life of university and the life of work. Having a baseline, for example, that students can use Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel, and at least they can switch on and off the computer. That is not sufficient. They need to become self-directed to be able to use technology that will come out in 10 years or 20 years' time. And that is getting them in a disposition where they feel comfortable with technology, that they can embrace technology and change when it comes to technology. There's no national, in any of the countries that I'm aware of, effort to have some sort of a diagnostic assessment of all the digital skills. That has never been done. It might be necessary, but I think we can go out from the assumption that our school learners, our students, they know a lot, but they don't necessarily know everything they need in terms of digital skills to become responsible citizens in using technology for educational and ultimately work purposes. And that's why we need to go step back and not just say, yes, we need to focus on robotics and we need to learn school learners to program, and that is highly relevant in South Africa at this stage. And I'm involved with a project in that regard at our university. That is half of the story. You need to ensure that the students' language is up to standard so that they can understand the programming language and then go on to the robotics. Once they start with robotics, there's some visual literacy skills that come in. So when we talk about digital skills, we should rather talk about all the multi-literacies, all the multi-skills that are involved. And it almost makes it a possible task, but I think once we have addressed some of the basic skills and fostered students to become self-directed, they can build on that. And from the nature of students, if I'm talking about the students at my institution and the learners at school level, they generally pick up quite quickly and understand this quite a lot. I've been working, prior to working at the university, I did a lot of computer training. I taught IT programming, and even upskilling of teachers when it comes to computer literacy. And I've seen it there, that once you see the need, you do become self-directed, and those skills are advanced. But yes, I think you raised two very important issues here. We need to look at the policies, and that needs to be done at a higher level to empower institutions to have sufficient policies. And a very important, there needs to be some sort of a snapshot taken of the digital skills. We don't know what the skills are per country, per region. It's not available, but we need to work on that. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you to Dr. Tsiamo. Do we have another comment or question on the floor? I will also, as we said, please also post on the chat if you have any questions or comments. Dr. Mtseko, can you please lower your hand if it's an old hand, and then we can get new hands that are raised. Maybe while we are waiting for new hands to be raised, I will take the privilege of being the moderator for the session, for our session today, and direct my question to Mr. Adinho. In your presentation, you mentioned, obviously gave background on the global partnership for sustainable development and data, and the different examples you gave of countries you are working with in setting up. You spoke about data hubs, you spoke about statistics, you spoke about capacity building, but also, most importantly, you spoke about analysis. And what was for me important was the identification, helping countries identify their data needs, the data platforms. But I think what stood out more was the data hubs that you helped to establish, especially with regards to the COVID-19 response. So if a country approaches you, or say SADC as a regional organization, which is a multilateral organization, approaches you for a partnership, to be part of the partnership or to join the partnership, how do you go about bringing a new partner on board to benefit from the program? And then how is the program designed in implementation? And I think most importantly, yes, you didn't mention it in your presentation, are there any cost implications for joining the program? And how are the costs shared as you deliver the different technical support through the program? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Chair. And maybe to start with your last question, if there are any cost implications. Now, because this is a regional partnership between the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and ECA. And what we've done, basically, when COVID came, we had to put aside all our projects and pivot a lot of our core resources, which is basically time of our staff, the technical skill, expertise, etc., redirected to support country partners on their efforts to combat COVID-19. And what we did was to basically mobilize global regional resources from different partners. So for example, Esri is a private sector company, and usually they sell their ArcGIS licenses at a quite hefty fee. So they basically came and said, you know, as part of our service to the region, we've been operating in a few countries, but we are happy to support many countries in the region with free licenses. And what do these licenses allow you to do? You basically have access to, you know, the internationally recognized platforms that are GIS enabled. So to develop a national platform or a data hub that would have taken probably 2-3 months, that was made possible by Esri and other partners, and it could be done within 2 days or 3 days. And working very closely with national statistical offices and other agencies, ministries of health, etc., the data then could be almost immediately posted into the hub, and it's it's visual ready, so it's actually possible almost immediately to start visualizing the data and sharing the data. And what was also very important about these types of partnerships was the interoperability aspects, the ability to integrate multiple platforms into one hub. So instead of having different platforms that look at health, look at mobility, look at, yes, those can exist independently, but a lot of the decision makers were saying we need all this information in one place where we can access it and use it for quick decision making and response. So you have integrated data from, for example, Qatar Computing Research Institute that developed hubs that integrate Google Map data and Facebook data on mobility patterns, etc. And that could then be integrated into this particular hub. You had the National Statistical Office with its own data and statistics hub on health indicators, demographics, etc. Looking at some of the data that they have on surveys, censuses, etc. All that would then be integrated into this particular hub. You have other partners who come in and say, we can provide data on settlements, boundaries, and provide some analytics, etc. All those could also be integrated into the hub. So this was centralized hubs that provide critical information for decision making. And the fact that ourselves, ECA, and all these partners came up and basically say, for the next 1 year, from April till April next year, all this will be provided pro bono. So none of the countries have had to pay anything, to benefit from this particular initiative, because it was a recognition that we all need to come together to fight the pandemic and to fight effectively, while facilitating collaboration and catalyzing partnerships, etc. Now, there are two ways. We can have a conversation about how SADC can join on the question of partnerships. SADC can join the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data and become a member of the partnership, in which case then you have access to over 250 members across the world. ECA, you have UNFPA, UNDP, you have World Bank, IMF, you have big corporate partners, you also have research and academia, you have large civil society organizations, we have national civil society organizations. All those are members of our partnership. So, and joining the partnership is very simple. It's free. You don't need to pay anything. I can connect you to our partnership manager, who will very quickly give you a very simple form, and it's done online, and within seconds you become a member. But now for the regional partnership with ECA, we would welcome an opportunity to discuss with you about what is it that we can do together, especially with the SADC countries. Look at opportunities for collaboration, and remember, this partnership is not coming in as something new. It basically seeks to complement or to plug the data gaps that exist, or to support ongoing national initiatives. So we are not coming in and saying, hey, this is something new, this is something that has not been done. No, it's basically partnership based, and all the partners that we are working with have one way and another links to the country level and the national statistical offices and many other partners that we work with. Provide their own pro bono. They pay for their own time. They're paid to do what they're supposed to be doing. And of course, when we all come together, all these resources, either technical, human, and financial, are then deployed in support of what countries are actually doing. So we welcome a meeting with you together with ECA, and we can have a conversation about some of the issues, especially at the regional level. What do you see as the cross-cutting issues when it comes to COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19 pandemic? So we can select a number of priorities where we think, there could be cross-cutting regional conversations, which then can have a multiplier effect to many countries within the SADC region. And in effect, then we end up killing, many birds with one stone. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dino. I think that's quite clear in terms of how you've highlighted in terms of how we engage with you. And I think Member states have also been listening to you as you've articulated the partnership and how we join the partnership. Very exciting, and definitely we will take you up on the opportunity to have a meeting with you, a follow-up meeting after this conference. Post this conference, we'll have a follow-up meeting with you, and we'll bring other member states on board just to sound out how we can move forward. And I think your work cuts across different sectors because you cut across statistics. We do have a statistics division in SADC Secretariat. We're actually currently busy with the protocol and statistics at a regional level. So I think this partnership comes at the right time. Because we also have a committee of the NSOs at regional level who are coordinating statistics at a regional level, because we publish every year what we call the SADC yearbook, statistics yearbook, where we look at economic statistics, social statistics that we publish in terms of at a regional level. But we also have the education sector that we work with. My colleague is currently couldn't join because he just went for an op, but he's responsible for education. And in the context of the SADC Virtual University, we also see how we can work with you, and especially with the UNESCO chair, as presented by Prof. Olafir. So there's a lot of opportunities for engagement. We are also working. We are now implementing what we call the SADC Industrialization Strategy. And through the SADC Industrialization Strategy, we've been actually tasked to do some analysis at a regional level in terms of our industrial capacities. But why is it that our trade is declining amongst us as SADC countries? And one of the weaknesses we have at the regional level is data. We don't have data. We don't have our own primary data. We have challenges or inadequate analysis capacity. So I think we see this as a good partnership to build on our capacity at the regional level and build our data capabilities and analysis so that we can give more informed data-driven decision-making, as you mentioned, as we advise our heads of state and our ministers for the policy direction that we need to take at the regional level. So I thank you for that. I'd like to read out in the chat, I think there was a question, or I can just call on Henry. I think Henry had a question directed to Dr. Stole. Henry from Zambia, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Although he has already answered the question in the chat, I think in his presentation, Dr. Sitole mentioned about the OpenStack services that were deployed just before the lockdown kicked in. So I wanted just to find out a detailed list of those services, and also instead of each country maybe requesting for services from the CHPC, is it possible that each participating country then can also deploy their own OpenStack and maybe have the same services running in their environments as part of their cyber infrastructure? Yeah, but I've seen that he has already answered the question in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, but Chair, maybe just to add on the response that I put on the chat, Henry, is that we have got on that OpenStack some dedicated services for SADC. So the additional equipment that we put in there, that was the funding that we have under the SADC cyber infrastructure. And we realized because some of the training that we put could not happen because of COVID-19. So we use some of that funds to buy additional equipment so that we have got dedicated services for SADC. On top of that, we also have got that equipment that we got from Intel grant. So by virtue of all those, you have got access to that OpenStack. And coming to deploying it in your own country, we have got a team that is looking at the OpenStack deployment. We can also look at the current infrastructure that we have in various countries in SADC and see what are the additional things. There might be some other network switches that we need to make sure that the OpenStack runs smoothly. But if we have got the right equipment, we will be able to assist in configuration of the OpenStack on your current environment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Stoll, and I hope that answered it, Henry from Zambia. Thank you. I had also in the chat a new hand. I was alerted by a new hand by Botswana. Dr. Mtshego, please take the floor.
I think there is a hand from Edward Rakate.
Waiting for Dr. Tsiamo. Mr. Rakate, please take the floor. South Africa, please take the floor.
Okay. Thanks, you, Chair. I think I just wanted to add on what Dr. Stoll have just mentioned in terms of the deployment of the OpenStack at the SHPC. I just wanted to also inform the member states that the reason why we did this was to make sure that the member state can have access to these resources at CHPC. And then this was also supported in terms of the COVID-19 challenges. So we realized that we can able to respond to some of the challenges because there are common areas, as you saw on Dr. Stoll's presentation, that we thought member states can able to use that resources for such work. And in addition, just to inform the member state that the deployment of that resource is currently taking on, it should be completed before we go to recess in December. So as soon as it's done, and maybe from January, the member state can use the resources. I just wanted to add that information on what Happy has just answered to Zambia. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rakati. Kone, can you please enable the mic for Botswana, Dr. Mtshego? But Dr. Mtshego, take the floor. I think your mic is being enabled.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I did raise a second hand, maybe just to get the conversation going. But I think I want to follow up with Davis on the opportunities for engagement with GSPDD. I think the elephant in the room, so to say, and we've seen this among countries, is often the sharing of the data. I think at the SADC cyber infrastructure, we are aware of this issue, and I think there are a number of approaches to this, including maybe at a country level, us obviously working with data policies that guide how institutions and how countries can share data, and then how us as a region can share data. I wanted to put this to Davis and find out that from him regarding the engagements they have maybe with multiple countries, say in the issue of COVID, maybe in a particular region. Have they maybe tried out or piloted a way of countries to engage regarding the issue of data sharing on specific joint projects, and what their experiences were? Because I think that will be critical insofar as cracking this particular nut. And then the second question, very quickly, is regarding coming together as a region to get services through some of the brokered service providers. I'm aware that NRENs, for example, can collectively bargain for services from providers. Are you maybe in a position to facilitate or to allow SADC as a block to be able to approach some of your services that you broker? Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you so much for that particular question. Maybe on the last question, yes, and it's basically the reason why this partnership exists between ACA and ourselves. So what we do is to basically engage with global level partners, and other partners who are operating in the region, but with either global outreach or regional outreach. And we negotiate and discuss with them, priorities. So for example, if the SADC region came together and said, when it comes to, for example, accessing satellite imagery, there are different levels. You may find that there's some commercial high resolution satellite imagery, which most countries would have to pay quite a hefty, fee to access those types of data sets. You may also find that there are analysis ready satellite imagery that are open source, free, and most often, even if you're to find openly available data sets, when it comes to satellite imagery, they tend not to be analysis ready. And so our role really is to broker partnerships with such providers to make sure that if the SADC region is interested, then we can discuss with partners and say, this is what and we basically make the business case for that type of support, to be made available, and that way then we aggregate demand and make it feasible and a lot easier for these partners, instead of engaging with multiple countries to basically offer a package of support that can be useful and meaningful. And of course, in return, we give them visibility, because we know that a lot of this stuff does not come free. So we give them visibility, and where it's possible, we negotiate for subsidized licenses, etc. So that, it's a scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of relationship. But mostly what we do is to negotiate for pro bono services and the delivery of these solutions free of charge in service of mankind. Now, when it comes to data sharing, there are certain basic critical factors that you have to look at. Number one is the governance context. We often tend to forget that data does not exist in isolation. Even the best quality data sometimes is not effectively used, to resolve challenges. And sorry to mention, but you've seen what's happening in America with the pandemic. And I'm sure they have very effective data systems, and this is made up to date and it's made available to the government. But if the context, the governance context and the leadership itself is not willing to use this data effectively, then you still end up with the same challenges. So good data and good decisions exist in a good governance context. And if the governance is bad, it's equally very easy to kill good data and to have very bad decisions being made, even when you have good quality data. That's number one. Number two, when it comes to data sharing, there's a historical issue of trust and policy and regulatory and legal issues that come into play. So, for example, national statistical offices are sworn, to privacy, and they adhere to certain international principles, which make it a lot difficult for them to share certain types of data sets, especially those that touch on, personal privacy. So whatever they share has to be disaggregated, etc. But even within countries, what we notice is that, there's very poor relationships between even government agencies. They simply don't talk to each other. There's competition for resources. The lack of trust and, the competition for resources, like I said, makes it, data and statistics is basically power, and it gives you power and access to resources. So it makes it a lot difficult. But what we do is to basically say, look, this is the purpose for which we are asking for this data. This is the purpose for which, and you have to be very specific. So it's not enough to say, let's open up all the data. In fact, most agencies will tell you, they'll ask you, what do you want to do with it? And it's a lot easier to go in and say, this is the data we need, and this is the purpose for which we are requesting for this data, and it is for social good, and to demonstrate that in practice. And then number three, we've also been conducting a lot of peer-to-peer exchanges between countries, so that we demystify and remove the fear that governments have when it comes to sharing data. So how has it been done in Ghana? Is it possible for the same to be done in Botswana? How did Ghana approach it? And we bring government officials who've actually done it and achieved some social good to speak to others, and then inspire them. And, it becomes an opportunity for them to open up and ask all the difficult questions that then make it easier for them to think about how they can do it themselves. But I'm happy to have a further conversation regarding some of these elements. Feel free to reach out to Annalena, and she can share my email contacts, and we can set up meetings where we have conversations around how we can support you and other partners around some of these issues. Thank you. If someone is speaking, then they're muted. Hopefully, I was speaking to myself.
Sorry. Yes, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Sorry. I was saying thank you to everybody, and thanks once more again to all the presenters for presenting in the morning session. I think we had a very fruitful morning session, very engaging, very exciting, and very enriching in all the presentations that was presented. And I'm happy that it's not only the presentations for the sake of presentations. We're already identifying possible opportunities for collaboration, both with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development and with the UNESCO Chair. So we're happy that we are having these new partnerships presented to us, and we're definitely going to take up the opportunity in bringing these partnerships on board in our initiative. I was saying that we encourage you to continue posting your questions and your comments, whether in the chat or in the questions section. We will continue to look at it as we progress our program throughout the day. We have reached our end of our morning session. We now have reached our break. May I ask Kone just to announce, give an announcement of how do we do this? Do we just keep on, we don't log ourselves out, we keep logged in, and we just come back at 2 o'clock. Maybe Kone, if you can give us some indication.
I think Cornelia is not responding.
Yeah. Yes, she's leaving it.
And it's fine, so we'll come back. It will still be on the same session.
Yeah, I think Kone has posted on the chat that we will start our afternoon session at 2. This room will close, so this link will close, and we will need to click on an afternoon link on the conference platform to join the afternoon session. So just to repeat that, the room, this session will be closed, and then we will get a new link for the afternoon session. I think we'll get the new link on the conference platform for the afternoon session. I think it's important, especially for the presenters who are presenting in the afternoon, to please note that. But if you have any challenges, there is a contact for the conference technical support, but you can also email me personally. Everybody has my personal, my email, my SADC email, if you have challenges of logging in at 2 o'clock. So enjoy your lunchtime. Sorry, we can't provide virtual lunch, but enjoy your lunchtime. We'll see you all at 2 o'clock. Again, this session room will be closed, and we'll get a new link through the conference platform. Thank you. See you all at 2 o'clock. And thanks once again to all the presenters. Thank you.